So in this video we're going to be working on the stuff that's kind of that yellowish color. It's mainly going to be drawer boxes as well as this piece of top trim, which is different than the drawing. The drawing came before the piece, so there were some modifications. The drawer boxes in the sketch are just regular boxes. I haven't learned how to do dovetails in the program yet. But my mounting hardware are Blum undermount slides. They're my slides of choice. I haven't made a drawer in quite a while, and then all of a sudden I made quite a few. These slides are much more expensive than they used to be about a year or so ago. So I was able to buy them on eBay a little cheaper than at the stores. So they are kind of expensive, but I think they're worth it. I went and I got the rough measurements for all of my openings, which was identical, which is convenient, so I don't have to make multiple sizes. And then there's a very large instruction booklet that comes with these slides, that how you calculate all the measurements. They have to be very exact, so I'm not going to go through all of that. This is not a how-to for the undermount slides, but you can kind of see the calculations I came up with. And I had to make 6 drawer boxes per vanity, so that's 12 total. So side pieces I was making 24, 12 fronts, 12 backs. Now I ordered a bunch of plywood in bulk. You could see by these calipers I was measuring one piece, and then I went around to the back side of the shop, and you could just see how much off all of this plywood is. It's quite a bit. Now this isn't really going to be a full through complaint video. I'm pointing that out because if you're making drawer boxes and I'm using a dovetail jig, it's really important this stuff is the same thickness. So I knew that this plywood was all different sizes, so I made sure to pick out pieces that were the same. Just a heads up, if you're making a bunch of these, I implore you to do the same or you're going to have a huge headache on your hand, because even little changes in thickness will change the setup for the jig. And then I just rough cut all these pieces. My height for all of my pieces is going to be the same except for the back drawer boxes, but I cut those at the same height of all of my other pieces to make my life easier. And then you'll see how I cut them down later in the video once the box is mostly assembled. So I take off the front of that piece because none of this stuff is square either. And you can see I have a stop set up on the radial arm saw, and I could just go through and cut all this stuff down. So the heights for all of these were just shy of 5 inches. So all the sides were, and the fronts and whatnot were that size. And you could see I have the stack of all of my pieces. And I did a test cut on this, but the built-in I'm working on below this I actually started before the Vanities. They're for the same customer. So I already had this jig dialed in for the plywood I was using. But if you have one of these, once you get them working, they work quite well, but it can be a little finicky to get them working. So I suggest doing a test piece just to make sure all your settings are aligned. There's a lot of adjustments to make on these depending on your router as well as your material being used. And then it's just this simple process of going through and cutting all of these dovetails. I'm using 3/4 inch plywood for this, which is a little bit of overkill for drawer boxes this size. But like I said, I ordered this stuff in bulk, and if I wasn't making them out of 3/4, I'd probably make 5/8, and it's really hard to find 5/8 inch plywood. And to be perfectly honest, 1/2 inch is a little hard to find these days as well, and it's not much cheaper than 3/4. So like I said, I go through and made all of these out of 3/4, and the drawer slides are either made for there's 2 different sizes, one for 3/4 I think to 5/8, and one from 5/8 to 1/2 inch. So if you're buying those Blum undermount slides, make sure you buy the right ones for the thickness of your material. So then I'm just going to go through and I'm cutting these in sections of the 2 sides as well as the front, and I'll keep them all together even though they're interchangeable because I'm making them on the jig. And then I just test them in the opening I have just to make sure they're the right size. Like I said, there's a lot of measurements to take and make adjustments for in order to use those slides. Once you've used them for a while, it's not as difficult as the first few times around, but I didn't want to make 12 boxes and then they didn't fit. So you can see I have everything labeled. There's 12 boxes, like I said, and now that I have the front on, I can mark for the back. The reason I leave the sides long is, as you can see, there's thickness for the front, which I never remember the exact measurement, and like I said, this plywood's all different thicknesses, so it's going to change. So the sides I also cut 2 inches or so oversized, and then I will cut those down as well. Now, one of the important things is this has to be a half, the bottom of the drawer box has to be 1/2 inch off the bottom of the frame. So I make sure to set the dado stack up with a 1/2 inch gap, and then I'm just running all of my pieces through on the table saw. I put the blue tape strategically on the bottom side of the drawer boxes, so as I'm sliding this whole stack through, which is quite a bit of parts at this point, it's easy to use that visual marker to remember the blue tape stays towards the fence. Once that's done, you can see I'm going to go through, and I have a stop set up on the left hand side this time around, so I'm just going to go through and cut off the back side of my drawer boxes. I believe these were 15-inch slides, so all of the drawer boxes are exactly 15 inches long. That's kind of how the math works out for those, and they have to be pretty accurate as far as the depth for them goes. Now on the back side, I'm doing a simple rabbet to put the backer on. That's because the main stress of the pulling out the drawer is going to be applied to the front of the drawer, which is why I put the effort into making dovetails. But the back of the drawer really doesn't experience any of that. The handle pulling on the front is the most important joint. So for the back side, like I said, I do a simple rabbet. And then once I have those 3 parts assembled, and the back side will sit on the bottom of the drawer box, so you'll see how I cut those. But the bottoms are going to be 1/4 inch plywood, and this was a true 1/4 inch. So with those 3 sides framed out, I made sure they were square, took the measurements, including for the depth of the dado I cut, and then I roughed out these bottom sections. The nice thing about drawer boxes is if you're making them in bulk, it does go really quickly. Making 1 or 2 drawer boxes is kind of a pain, but making them in bulk like this, it goes by pretty quickly. It's just really just repeating the same thing over and over again. So then I had my bottoms, they slid in quite nicely. Like I said, it was convenient that this plywood was actually a true 1/4 inch, so I could use that 1/4 inch dado stack. And then I could go through and cut these backs to the proper width as well as the proper depth. Like I said, I cut them long when I was first cutting pieces, just so I didn't have to keep switching out dado stacks and flat blades. So now they're a little bit too tall and a little bit too wide. So as you can see, I'm just trimming down the top and then trimming them down to width on the radial arm saw, and then my backs will be set into place. I like to calculate these as I go because little things can set off your measurements, and it's just easier instead of calculating them all at first, cutting your pieces and finding out you mismeasured on something, to build them as you go and cut as you go. So for the drawer slides, I just have them tacked in place with 1 screw. When I glue these together, I make sure they're square, but I like to let them dry in their sitting in the frames, so that if the frames are a little off square, which in this circumstance I don't think they were, they form fit to that. So when they're dry, they'll work really unless, I'm talking about within reason. If your drawer box is off by 1/4 inch, you're going to have problems. But here or there, a little bit off, it will still work for these. And then you can see this is how I assemble them. It's pretty simple. Lots of glue in the dovetails, a couple brads to hold the backer on, and then I will flip them upside down, check my diagonals for square, and then, like I said, slide them into the frame to dry. And that is what that series of ones look like. Now the front of these, like I said, this will be covered with the facades of the drawers. The drawer fronts will cover all of this, but I'm still going to go through and veneer this plywood just so that it's finished and you don't see that raw ply. You won't be able to see this frame once all of the parts are in place, but it's still a nice finish to put on there. It also protects the wood a little bit. The end grain of plywood will absorb a lot of moisture, especially in a bathroom. So then there's the drawer boxes mounted, and these are soft close, so they're obviously going to soft close. And doing this, see, I'm pointing out now that they're flush with the front of the frame, which is important for when I put all of the false fronts on. So for this, once again, there's going to be measurements for this. I forget exactly what the offset was for this. It looks like it's about 1/4 inch. So I just made a mark of 1/4 inch on all of these. I clamped those in place because even when I pre-drill, sometimes they want to dance around on me. And since I bought these on eBay, they didn't come with mounting screws. So I bought some screws. I pre-drill only 2 holes, one in the front, one in the back, when I'm test fitting these, because I usually have to take some of this stuff out when I put finish on it, and they have to be set back up. So I put in 2, which is more than enough to hold it in place for the time being, and then I could put the last bit of hardware on the drawer boxes. So there's 2 flanges in the back of these that have to have holes drilled, and that's for the tabs in the back are for adjustments. You could adjust the drawer box up and down with the tabs. They sell a jig for this, and all I do is once those are in place, I put the drawer in and I kind of softly slam it into the back. It leaves 2 marks where those fins are supposed to be, and I just drill the accurate hole on top of them. Been doing it that way since I started buying these, and I've never had an issue. Same thing for the clips that go on the bottom that lock the drawer into the slides. They sell a jig, but if you have a long extension on your drill, which I usually have a long extension on my drill anyway, it's enough to get over the lip of the clips, and you can just drill these screws into place without having to buy the special jig for it. Same thing. I've been doing it this way since I started getting these, and I've never had an issue. And then once the holes in the back are drilled and the clips are on the bottom, you could push these into place. They'll snap into place, and then you can soft close them. I really didn't have any issues with any of these not fitting or having to be tweaked. Like I said, that's kind of the plus side of spending so much time making sure your openings are square, because then when it comes time to mount these, you don't have to make changes. Now, I've definitely mounted stuff unsquare before, and there's usually workarounds for everything, but it's a much faster process when you don't have to worry about it. So then for the top, in the drawing, the top is a thicker front. You might have noticed in the drawing I have it more matching the facade on the underside. But as I was looking at these drawings, I noticed it was a thicker front. So I was happy to make that adjustment before I put the wrong thing up top. So this is just basically a flat piece of oak. I trimmed it side to side. Now usually on corners I like to do miter so you don't see end grain, but this would have been a really steep degreed cut because the front sticks out so much further than the sides. So you'll see all I did was cut this end to end, and I could screw through the top into that plywood because there is going to be a sink up here, so you won't see it, and it's going to be one flush piece of stone, so you won't see any hardware through the top. So then I have end grain on the side, and all I did was I just wrapped the side the same way like I did the bottom. So peeking out the front, there's maybe a 5/16 of an inch exposed piece of end grain, and like I said, there is a top going on this which will overlap the top frame of all of this, so you will not even notice that little bit of exposed end grain. It was much easier to do than to try and calculate and cut an extremely steep miter for that top. So that's what both of these look like. Now I was working on the doors at the same time, but Amazon didn't ship me the proper hardware, so I could only mount one set. So that will, and this one, it wouldn't fit in this video anyway. So next week will be the doors.